So I invite both reverends to be here. Please welcome them. Tanveer has already introduced them, so I'm not going to introduce them again. Let me take this microphone from here to.
Community sort of smoke, liberal arts college in England. And so I developed several projects about Islamic feminism. That was a thing that really interested me. But my final project before I moved out of academia was a book about the experience of wearing the niqab. Because in Europe at the time there was a series of bans of the niqab, in France, in Belgium, Austria. There are 15 countries in Europe that banned wearing of the niqab in public, and so to me it was just a bizarre situation. They created the problem, the artificial problem. And there was, of course, a lot of discussion of the niqab and why it has to be banned in the media, and politicians were talking and community leaders were talking. But I wanted to really hear something from the actual women who wore the niqab. But, they were nowhere to be found in the media. And then I started looking in academic sources, and there was nothing pretty much about their experiences. Nobody ever bothered to interview them. They were never a topic of a robust research project. So I did it. I did that research project, and I interviewed 40 women. And of course, those women are highly visible in the West, in the public sphere. So they were telling me about those experiences of Islamophobia in the streets, but also in institutions. And so I got this really good awareness from their perspective, how they experienced Islamophobia. And then a lot of things in my life changed, and now I'm an ordained American Baptist minister. And of course, the way your brain works, you can't change it just because you change your career. And so, I was thinking there is this Islamophobia in the history of the church, and it must have some bearing on what's going on today, because what's going on today, it's not new, and so that really sort of pushed me to explore more in the historical direction rather than sociologically about now.
I think for me on this topic, I went to Harvard Divinity School, which is an interfaith divinity school. So I got to be sort of formed as a pastor in how I think about things in an interfaith way of imagining myself. And so some of my classmates now are religious leaders in Judaism. I went to school with Buddhist monks, so rabbis, imams. There's so many different people that I knew from that time. And so I guess I was trained to think about things from an interfaith perspective. And when I did that and I was listening to people, I understood that people's experience of what it's like to practice their religion in the United States is very different from mine. I had a lot of privilege. Recently, for instance, we had to have a security guard for the first time because my church did this big sort of anti-ICE nativity set where baby Jesus was wearing zip ties, right? And then we got a bunch of death threats. And that's not fun. None of that's fun. But at the same time, I was trying to explain to people, this might be a first time for us, but minoritized religious groups in the United States deal with this all the time. So this is not a new thing, and in fact, we could learn a lot from those groups who have been dealing with this for a long time. So the other thing that's been really important for why Islamophobia really matters is because of how it dovetails and intersects right now with Christian nationalism. So Christian nationalism is pretty much, the theological is really in control of this country in so many ways. You see it right now with the Iran war. I think you really see that there's theological justifications for that being wheeled out, not just from the White House, but all these preachers who are around there. Pete Hegseth has a Deus Vult tattoo, which is the Crusader motto, and I was just starting to read this, and it's awful. He wrote a book about the Crusades praising them, right? So And so and calling on that to be the prevailing logic of the United States is the Crusades. So this is also a man who famously in a bar repeatedly shouted, "Kill all Muslims," right? This is the man in control, and he goes to, he's the one dropping bombs. He's making those decisions. He goes to a self-avowed white Christian nationalist church who's teaching these sorts of ideas. So Islamophobia intersects with all the sorts of things we're facing in the country right now, whether that's ICE cruelty and immigration cruelty, or that's our foreign policies, all these different ways, because it all goes back to that. And Islamophobia is a key sort of plank in the Christian nationalist platform.
Very good. So how long did it take to complete this project?
I mean, it's really hard to say because, the conversations we had in the beginning, we had them for years probably. And then at one point we said that we just have to do it, because if we just keep talking about it and never write it, then, our thinking will never get out to meet other people's ideas. So I would say the actual process of writing, 6 months. Yes, about 6 months. So we had a lot of that sort of pretty much ready, just had to be written down, I think.
Yeah. But from pitching it from the publisher till it came out, it took 2 years.
Right.
So, but there's all sorts of reasons why that takes a long time.
So did you sign with the publisher before starting the writing or after?
You have to, to pitch it, to write a proposal, you have to write a chapter and an introduction. So we wrote that, and then I think we did sort of sit around and wait for them to approve it or not, because, this press, Judson Press, is a Baptist press, right? And it's affiliated with our religious tradition, but they've never really published a book like this before. And so it was an open question on whether they would, right? And whether they would, because in our tradition, it's a big tent. There's conservatives, there's progressives, and in publishing a book like that, they'll probably get some hate mail, but most of the things that people have said have been very loving and very kind. And I think that they've actually seen their way to maybe publishing some more of this sort of content is actually a good spiritual and financial decision for them. So that's really good.
So as you were writing different chapters, your manuscript, I'm sure that you must be contacting with other people, sources. Some of those people might be from different churches. Some of them might be from among the Muslim communities. So just share with us your overall experiences as two authors writing on a rather not common topic, but a difficult topic. What were some of the highlights of the experiences and some of the challenges? Was there a moment where you thought that, maybe we will not be able to complete this book? Were you discouraged by people? Why are you writing a book on Islamophobia in the church? You are a minister in a church. So just share with us.
Yeah, so this publisher actually wasn't the first publisher where we pitched the book. The first one is called Fortress Press, and it's I think Presbyterian? Lutheran publishing house. And the editor who evaluated the proposal said he really liked it, but the editorial team said it was just too controversial, so they turned it down. And so that was definitely one moment when we thought, nobody will touch it. It's just too controversial. They're afraid. But because, we're Baptists, theologians, we thought that perhaps our Baptist publisher would be more open if we give this book a more Baptist frame, explaining why we think our Baptist theology supports this project. And so, I think this was important, and so they were able to overcome apprehension, and they did consider that there might be controversies, but in the end we did have more support from them, and they went ahead. They really took a big risk because it's just a very unusual book for them. It's not your typical Christian book, so they just didn't know what they were going to get. But I will say, and blowing our own trumpet, but we've beaten all the records for this publisher. We sold more in the first month than they sold in first quarters. So they are shocked. They don't know how to understand the situation that books that they used to churn out weren't so successful, and suddenly this one is. I think the strength of the book is basically that it's coming out from relationships that we have created. But maybe Michael can say more. I already said something, so or do.
No, I mean, I think that's true. I mean, for years, even before we moved to Chicagoland, I think that this book really emerges out of the relationships that we've had with Muslims, and also, with other Christian clergy and talking to them. One of the things that we had is a survey, right? And so there was a lot of pastors there who said, oh, why would I care about Islamophobia? Why would I want to learn about Islam? All these sorts of things. I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat in the fact that there's some people who don't want to. But the vast majority of things that we found, and I find this really hopeful, right, is that people want to do more. They just don't know how. They don't have the tools. They're ignorant, not in like a negative sort of slant on that word, but they literally just don't know. And so the more we can resource people, probably that's going to allow people to sort of shortcut what, for us, we spent years sometimes spinning our wheels trying to do this or trying to do that. And so we try to teach people and give people the tools right off the bat to avoid some of the mistakes that we make, right? And I think we're hopeful that people don't just pick up this book like a pastor picks up this book and reads it and then just sort of says, okay, well, that was fun. We hope that they'll actually, we have discussion questions. It's meant to be read in a group. It's great for a Bible study or a book group, or it's meant to sort of take these resources and put them out and sort of study with other people, in conversation with other people. That's how these ideas can be transformative. So it's all these sorts of relationships. And then there's all these relationships we don't know. Someone has a relationship with the book, and maybe they go out and they do this really important work. We need so many more people to really care about this issue and to do something about it. So we're hopeful.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that Michael and I founded this interfaith action network called Challenging Islamophobia Together Chicagoland, and we founded it at the end of 2023 because there was after things started up in the Middle East, and when we started, we saw more and more that what was going to unfold was a genocide in Palestine. We also saw that Christian churches stepped back from interfaith collaborations, specifically with Muslim congregations, Muslim partners. And we heard about it from the Muslim partners we worked with. And so, and so we thought, we need to bring more Christians on board. We need to sort of turn this around because, it's obviously a good thing. It's just, at the time, and I think we're still thinking at the time, a lot of Christian communities were afraid to work with Muslims because in the context of the war and genocide in Palestine, they were afraid to be called anti-Semitic. And so, one of the events that really pushed us to go into this more deeply was the murder of a little boy called Wadi al-Fayumi in October 2023 here in Chicagoland. We were documenting reactions of Christian congregations to that event because it was a horrific event. But the reactions were kind of, lukewarm. And we thought, and so we organized a memorial for Wadi. It was an interfaith memorial with a Muslim partner, a Jewish partner, and the representative Delia Ramirez. And that was when we thought this kind of action network, like what we're doing now, is going to be useful and is going to be really necessary in the future because horrible things will keep happening. We cannot wait until something horrible happens then to start creating these partnerships. We need them in place in order to react, quickly. And so that is one of our aims to, build the ark before the flood. But yeah, it's just having people to come, do things right now, during the crisis, also between the crisis. And so we started this initiative called Reading the Quran in Churches, where congregations invite Muslim partners who then recite the Quran and explain about the Quran, and there's a Q&A session so that the congregants, the Christian congregants, can ask questions and they can get educated. And so, and why did we come up with this idea? Because somebody, a political candidate in Texas, burned the Quran and said it was powered. She was powered by Jesus in burning the Quran, and so a horrific thing. But our response was, don't burn the Quran, read the Quran. Very simple.
So in particular, how did the Muslims respond when you approached them that you are writing this book? Tell us about what were responses of Muslim organizations if you approached them, or Muslim individuals. Because this is a learning process. You described how did the Christian responded. How did the Muslim respond?
I think by and large, with a lot of support, which is something we've been very grateful for, and really thankful for. I think the other response, which is not necessarily not supportive, is why. Like, why are you writing about this? Like, why do you care about it? And I think we talk about this in the book, right? We care about it from a faith-based perspective. We're not just doing it to be nice or because we think it's a cool thing to do. We're doing it because for us, we really think that it's a key part of what it means to be a Christian. And that's really important for our faith and living that faith in the public square in ways that are really important for us. So for us, it's a question of discipleship and about drawing near to God and what we can do with our faith in the world. So I think that's something that, one of the arguments we make is that it's great to be nice, it's good to be kind, it's good to be benevolent and all that, but you should do this work for selfish reasons too, which is the fact that you're going to learn so much more and have so much more nuance to your theological ideas. You're going to get so much closer to God through this conversation, and really trying to entice people with that. So many people act as if interfaith dialogue is a scary thing, that God doesn't want us to know about each other, that God is somehow acting very jealously and sort of guarding this knowledge, and there's a lot of fear. And part of the book is saying, no, I mean, I think that God has to delight in diversity. Why else wouldn't there be so many different religions, so many different cultures, so many different languages, so many different races, ethnicities, all these cultures, all these different ways of being in the world. God must delight in those. And so if we want to know more about God, knowing more about each other is a really important place to start.
Yes, people ask us why. They're surprised, that they're confounded by it. But Muslims, Muslim authors, activists, organizations like CARE, they have been shouting about Islamophobia from the rooftops for years, and somehow a large part of the American society, Western society, it was easy to ignore. And so, it's undeniable that Christians do have privilege. White Christians especially have privilege in this country. And so the only ethical thing you can do with such privilege is to use it for the advancing and benefit of those who don't have the privilege. And so we said, perhaps if it's two pastors, two ordained people, two Baptists, that's usually, Baptists evoke these strange images of, fundamentalism, and there are many fundamentalist Baptists for sure. But we thought, maybe if we say something, there will be people who will be more open to listen, to hearing this from us. And it's hard to sort of assess or prove or evaluate that this actually is what has happened, but we did manage to stir some discomfort among the more conservative Christian circles. There have been articles about us, and so actually, by seeing these reactions, we know we have succeeded because they didn't want to hear us, but they had to somehow hear it because we see the reaction.
Right.
So.
Very good. So my next question was what you were alluding to toward the end. So obviously the Lake Street Church is a huge church, Baptist church. And so did you hear someone saying, why did you write this book?
Lake Street?
At Lake Street?
Why did you write this book? I mean, was slightly disturbed or annoyed among your congregants? Or
Still dark.
outside of your own church, Anna, you work with the Greater
ministry.
Chicago Area Baptist Ministry. Did you hear from somebody? Was this the only topic that interested you?
I mean, people really, some Baptists who are very, very much sort of inward-looking, very much insulated from the outside world. I don't know how else to describe it. They were surprised, and so a lot of them were happy about the success because chapters from this book were reprinted in the Christian Century, which is a really prestigious Christian magazine, and we are on the radar of all these different kinds of Christians. And I asked one of them, and he's a fairly progressive man, but not super progressive. He's somewhere in the middle on the scale. And I said, what did you think about this chapter? Because he told me that he'd seen it in the Christian Century. And he said something very strange. I'm always happy to see American Baptist authors in the Christian Century, but he refused to actually say anything about the book. So he was happy that we got this, prestigious magazine reprinting our thing, but he was not really that interested in the thing itself. Which, to me, it was a clear enough message that, he was not going to support the message, but he would support us because we are American Baptists in the Christian landscape, which is, a very strange,
I mean, one of the reasons we wrote the book is my experience sort of at Lake Street, the church that I pastor. At Lake Street Church, it feels like the coolest thing you can do for interfaith dialogue would be to talk exclusively with Buddhists all the time and practice new forms of meditation. And I think that's awesome, by the way. I'm not saying it's the either or thing. We do a lot of interfaith dialogue with Buddhists, and I think that's great. But there wasn't necessarily, at the beginning, as much excitement about, for instance, going to an interfaith iftar or doing sort of different projects. But I think that there is now, but that's taken a little bit more education, right? And I think that's this is not wasted effort. Whenever we do something for God or whenever we do something that's trying to make our world and put it back together again, none of that's wasted. That's all really important stuff to continue to do.
All right, so before going to you may have question. Be brief. Question has to be a question, not a speech. Okay. Whether it is a question or comment, it has to be within a minute. But before that, I just want to ask you, what's next on your mind?
Yes, I'm already on the next project in my head, and that project is going to be called Interfaith After Gaza. So we are going to actually address that rift, that break in the interfaith world that was based on the reactions of different faith communities to the genocide. It's going to be an interview-based book, so we're going to be interviewing Christian, Muslim, Jewish activists from different ends of the spectrum, just to hear, different opinions. And we're trying to figure out what is the way forward, because I don't think we can go back to the way it was before. And in fact, when you look at Palestine, that was in those liberal interfaith circles, it was always this kind of elephant in the room. That people would sit together, they would eat, they would talk about local issues, but it was impossible to touch the issue of Palestine because there are diverging opinions about what Palestine should be, or Israel, and so, but it was somehow, people sort of kind of glossed over it. That somehow it kind of, at least on the surface, it kind of, it worked. I don't think it can work that way now, not anymore. So that's why we're trying to write this.
Very good. We look forward to it. We pray for the success